This is a carburettor off a 1951 model. Don't know what it's like. It was filthy. I've just cleaned it up briefly with a bit of petrol. At some stage it's been painted over with a bit of silver paint. You can see the colour of the original pot metal there, and this is silver paint over the top. If I end up using this carburettor, I'll probably remove all that paint and just leave it at the original pot metal colour. What I'll do is to strip it down and see what it's like internally. Just a brief inspection, external inspection anyway. There doesn't appear to be a lot of wear in the shafts, in the butterfly shaft there, which is good because you can get a bit of air sucking in there. If there is, well, there's a little bit of movement. You can see that. I do have other carburetors in a box elsewhere, so I could look at maybe making one good carburettor out of a couple. I don't know at this stage. I'll pull this apart first and just see what condition it's like inside. The other ones, I don't know how long they've been off a vehicle. I mean, I took this off a vehicle myself when I had the 51 model I had. So this was taken off a motor. So it's been sitting on a motor for 40 odd years. The other ones have just been lying around in boxes gathering dust and whatever, so I'll just see what the condition of this one's like and then compare it to the others. At least I know this was complete, so all the linkages are there. That's a good starting point. So anyway, I'll start just stripping the main components off to see what it's like, see if there's any major wear. If there is, I'll start looking at some other carburetors that I've got in stock. I've started to assemble the carburettor. This is the one I've started on, the one off the 1951 engine. The closer examination, this spindle here does have movement in it, and whether you can hear it. So that's not good. The float at the moment is jammed, probably gunk in between the shaft and the hole in the floating bowl. So at the moment that doesn't come up. Hopefully that could be relieved, but the main problem is this butterfly shaft and the movement in it. So ideally I'd rather have another one. The valve in the bottom there's no movement in that. I haven't pulled that out yet, but that's the next task. I'll pull that out. Moves freely up and down, so that's not an issue. So I'll do that next. But I'm looking at not using certainly this part of the carburettor. So in my other carburettors I've found one here. Put that up there. Which is not going to sit up, but anyway. Oh, hang on. Move that out of the way. This one. Now, the butterfly shaft on this is tight, no movement at all, free movement as well, so that's okay. Not sure about the valve in this one. I mean, until I pull it out I can't tell. The float bowl came out without too much difficulty. That came out. The condition of the bowl itself is clean. There's the float which came out. Inside of the bowl is clean, so it's actually good inside. The outside looks a bit corroded, but that will probably clean up. So I'm about to now strip down the bottom end of the carburettor, pull off the bowls. So what I've got to do, or what I am going to do, is to remove the bowls and remove the bottom end of the carburettor there. There's a couple of large nuts on the bottom which no doubt won't move very easily, but that's the next thing I'll tackle, so I can strip it right down. Now I've been through my carburettors and sorted out what I believe is now a usable one. This is actually a composite of two carburetors. I've taken the bowl off one and the main housing off another. Actually the bowl and the vacuum chamber and piston off one, including the valves, and this body itself off another. This body actually has no wear at all in the spindle, so the other ones actually did. There was a fair bit of slop in that, so it would have sucked air. This particular bowl was the better one of the ones I had available. The reason it's better is just related to the spindle here. It's perfectly clean. The other ones had a little bit of corrosion in there, so I've taken this one, and the bowl is, the float is quite serviceable as well. Everything's clean inside. The needle valve was okay, that's not a problem. It still needs to be cleaned up internally. I haven't stripped all the valve apart yet, other than to have an initial look at the condition. Sorry, not valve, jet, I suppose you call it. The piston still needs a little bit of clean up, probably with a bit of steel wool, which I'll do again in a minute in a bath of petrol. Inside of the chamber is nice and clean, the piston's fine. A little bit of corrosion on this side, which I can get off with a bit of steel wool, that's not an issue. The needle is actually very straight, doesn't appear to have any noticeable wear on it, so that's okay. The rest of it in there it moves quite not tight, but no free movement in there. The hole is not elongated, so that's good. I have had that off. As I said, I took it off another carburettor, so it's only in finger tight. Get that out. So anyway, what I'm about to do is to clean it properly. And so it's just a superficial clean to get the muck and some of the corrosion off, which is pretty well done now. Still got to make sure I've cleaned everything internally, including the butterfly. As I say, everything there seems to be quite okay, quite solid. This I've got to pull apart. I've got actually a kit here, gasket kit. It suits more than just this particular carburetor, it suits a couple, so there's a lot of extra pieces in there, so I've got to sort through that when I reassemble. It's a little filter in there. on the inlet to that, so I guess I've got a few filters in the system now, one on the pump itself, one before the pump and one after the pump, so that won't do any harm. So it's now a case of just doing a final clean and then reassembling everything with a new set of gaskets, which, as I say, I've got there, so I'll start that now. I've fitted all new gaskets to the carburettor. Fairly straightforward. I actually printed out an exploded diagram of the carburettor off the DB18 website, so that showed me where all the individual pieces were to go. As it happened, the the way this jet was put together, it had an assortment of washers and things in the wrong places, so obviously whoever put it together didn't have a diagram. Anyway, it's round the right way now. Just put it back on. I've got a new gasket for this as well. Came with the kit. So everything should be right. The adjustment is something I'll have to look at. So it's not, the mixture is not properly adjusted. I mean, I've got some adjustment in there to give it some enrichment. Whether that's too much or too little, I have no idea at this stage, so I'll do a bit of research on that. If not, I'll treat it like any other SU I've worked on and make the adjustments in a similar fashion. Now, I've got some linkages for this. I've just got to sort through to make sure I've got the right ones. I've put the fuel line over onto the fuel pump. I haven't fixed it in position yet because I want to make sure it lines up with the carburettor, and also I haven't tightened the fuel bowl on the bottom of the carby, so I need to get that in the right position so I can fit it on. I'll do that in a minute. Other than that, everything seems to be functional. This carburetor is I guess it's the best I've got in terms of composite, and the main thing is there's no wear in the butterfly. Not many moving parts in an SU, but that's one that if it's worn can cause some problems in trying to adjust the mixture. So I'll just nip that up, then I'll start to fit this fuel line into the carburettor. I don't intend to put the air filter on at this stage. That's something I'll put on after I've got the engine started and properly adjusted. I mean, the air filter takes up a big amount of space in here and just restricts what you can access. So I'll just mount this up, and then I'll start looking at the linkages and connecting the cables. I'm adjusting the throttle linkages on the carburettor. Similar to the gear linkages, it has a lot of individual components, and wear in any one of them can cause problems. So this is the rod to the accelerator pedal, all cup either end. This is not so bad, these are not worn. That activates this lever here, which goes across to the other side of the car with another, so I can see this, another lever down there which moves backwards and forwards when you press the accelerator. So there's a rod on that one, which is this rod here, which goes up and links onto this, and then there's another rod that goes on the bottom of that, short rod, which links up with the actual butterfly there, the throttle. So as I say, each link in the chain causes problems if there's any wear. Now the cups on all the rods are fine. Where I've got the wear is in this lever here. Now I don't know whether you can see that. There's wear in there, so this is a bit sloppy, so it's not precise in its action when the rod comes back. So some of that push results in this tilting up, so it's loss in movement on the throttle. Now to fix that, two solutions. One is to put a bush in there, which would take a fair amount of work, something that I'm not prepared to do anyway. You could build up the shaft. It's worn on this end, I can just feel it with my finger, which would mean, certainly at home, building it up with a weld and then trying to grind it back into shape. That's very time consuming. And the other alternative, and this is the one I'm going to take, is to fit a brass shim into the gap in between. Now I've got various thicknesses of shim. I think that's 5 thou. I might go down to 2 thou and put a shim in there. I'll put copper grease as well, and the shim will take that up. Now brass is not going to wear, certainly, I mean eventually wear, many years, and the reason it's not going to wear too much, the only movement you've got is that much movement, so it's not a rotation or a full rotation, it's just a part rotation, and it will just take up the slop. As I say, it won't wear much, and if it does wear, just pull it apart, replace the shim. So that's what I'm about to do. So I'll put the camera down, just cut a bit of this with an old pair of scissors I've got, and then see if I can fit that in the gap. Now I might have to go to a finer brass shim than that, but I'll just try the thicker one first of all. Alright, that 5 thou shim worked. It's taken all the slop out of that, which is good, and I've connected all the linkages up. Now the adjustment of the linkage has taken me a bit of time, and I worked out that the first link you've got to get right is this one. Now it needs to be able to open the throttle fully. I'll just press the accelerator, which is right up there, so he's got to be able to open it fully. So adjusting that one first was important, then this one, adjust the length of that so when the stop screw is hitting on the rest there, there's actually no movement between the link there and the link there. So I've done that. The accelerator pedal, of course, is inside. There's another link there, and I've adjusted the link to get the pedal high enough off the floor to allow for carpet to go in, so I might have to adjust that a bit more. But if I push the accelerator from inside the car, it opens the throttle right up. Now when the links are adjusted properly, it should come back and rest on the stop, not above it. And you'll find that if the links are a bit long, it'll sometimes keep that throttle open. The other adjustment you have to make, it's only a minor one, is the hand throttle, which I assume is just used for starting. Now that's the hand throttle lever there. There's a cable on the dash, comes and locks onto that. Now you adjust that so there is a, you can see in there, get a screwdriver. In here there has to be a gap, and you can see the screwdriver there, between that lever, which is the main throttle lever, and the actual hand throttle lever there. The gap needs to be a 64th of an inch, or around about 15th thou. I've adjusted that, so when you pull that throttle as far as it will go, and it doesn't go very far, and it comes back until it, let's see this, trying to see it through the viewfinder. That's the hand throttle lever, and that's it stopped there, so it doesn't go back far. It's just enough to pull it back and put a little bit of throttle in there, which I assume is for starting. Now I haven't done the mixture cable yet, that's the next one. That's fairly straightforward. This is the cable here. I've just got to mount that in there. Now that is adjusted so when the cable is in its resting position, which is about there, there should be no gap between the, hang on, pull that, you can see that this is the valve being pulled down. When that's pulled down, it comes back up and rests against the nut here. The spring pulls it back up, so there should be no gap in there at all. So that's basically, if you connect it when it's in its steady state position, which is there, it's actually hard up against the nut, so that shouldn't be difficult to put on. So the carburettor, except for the, stand up, except for the inlet pipe there, it's the only thing I've got to do to connect up the carburettor.